Please note that the investigation process and the emergency response plan should complement each other in terms of the initial response and initial data gathering for incident prevention. Please find more information in the emergency management course that will be held after this. The accident investigation will require an analysis of all the information available to identify what went wrong and determine the steps that must be taken to prevent the incident from happening again. The first step is gathering information. The first stage of the investigation is to gather evidence to help establish what happened and how it happened. The investigation should establish the following: the time and location of the accident, details of injured parties and anyone else involved, details of the injury or ill health caused, the activities being undertaken at the time of the injury, any unusual working conditions, whether the risk was known or not, whether a safe system of work existed and was being followed, the level of competence of all involved, whether the organization and arrangement of work was a factor, whether work materials were a factor, whether the workplace layout or environment was a factor, difficulties in using plant or equipment, whether adequate safety equipment was provided and used, the contribution of cleaning or maintenance activities, any other contributing factors, and lastly, an understanding of the chain of events. Some documentation that may assist you in step number 1 is to have a look at the risk assessments, the safe system of work, the permits to work, the working procedures or job guides, any operating instructions, pre-use inspections of equipment, training records, maintenance records, previous incident reports, workplace inspections, and environmental monitoring records. Once you have gathered all the information on the incident, the next step is to analyze the information. The analysis involves examining all the facts to improve understanding of what happened and why. The analysis should be carried out in a systematic way so that all possible causes and consequences are fully considered. There are a range of formal methods available to help the process. Essentially, a multi-causal analysis looks to map the contributing factors, continually asking why, to identify not just the direct causes, but also the underlying and root causes. Understanding the underlying and root causes will help us to identify the appropriate risk control measures to be taken. Remember, the investigation and analysis of work-related accidents and incidents forms an essential part of the management of health and safety. Learning lessons from experience is critical to preventing future accidents and incidents. Carrying out an accident investigation provides a deeper understanding of the risks associated with work activities. Learning what went wrong enables improvements to risk control measures and management's arrangements for supervision and monitoring. This multi-causal analysis, asking why until we get to the root cause of the incident. For instance, the top event or injury and accident was the apprentice severing 3 fingers on a bandsaw. Asking the question why gives us 2 reasons. The first immediate cause is that the guard was not properly set. Asking why again gives us 3 underlying causes. They didn't know how to properly set the guard. They didn't have time to properly set the guard, or they couldn't be bothered to properly set the guard. Here we now look at the root cause by asking why. Why didn't they know how to properly set the guard? Why didn't they have time to properly set the guard? Or why couldn't they be bothered to properly set the guard? The 3 answers could be a lack of instruction, training, and supervision, giving us our root cause, and a starting point for management review. There was poor planning or unrealistic targets. Again, improvements to risk control measures, management arrangements for supervision and control can occur here. Or poor culture, lack of positive behavior in the company as a whole. Handling these root causes will then help us with the underlying, immediate, and the total eradication of the top event. Let us now take a look at the green section. Remember, we have unsafe acts and unsafe conditions. Looking at the light blue on the left-hand side, you will notice that this is a form of an unsafe act, the guard not being properly set. Let us now take a look at some unsafe conditions that could have contributed to the apprentice severing 3 fingers on a bandsaw. Again, asking the question why the guard was not properly set. The immediate cause here is the same as an unsafe condition compared to an unsafe act. But asking the question why again leads us to a different underlying cause. Here the apprentice was not paying attention, or because they were bumped. This is a different unsafe condition that existed. Let us now take a look at the root causes of these underlying causes. This could be a lack of supervision, poor work planning or lack of breaks, or poor workshop layout. This shows us that the root cause of both unsafe conditions and unsafe acts can be mitigated. Asking the question why, in the first instance, from the top event, the guard was not properly set. If we had to stop there, it would be very easy to point fingers at an employee. But asking why again leads us to underlying causes. They didn't know how. They didn't have time. They couldn't be bothered. They were not paying attention, or they were bumped. Again, if we just stopped there at those underlying causes, we could very quickly again point fingers. But let us ask another why. And this is in order to get to the root cause of what is the actual problem within the company. What are the weaknesses? The lack of instruction, the lack of training, or lack of supervision could be an issue. All things that can be mitigated. Poor work planning or unrealistic targets. Ensuring that we have an active plan in ensuring instruction, training, supervision, that we plan work properly and set realistic targets for our employees, as well as creating a good, healthy safety culture with a positive behavior within the company can root out these root causes. Again, looking at lack of supervision, poor work planning, or poor workshop layout has an impact both on unsafe acts as well as unsafe behaviors. This shows us the importance of digging deeper by asking why and not being satisfied with the immediate causes or underlying causes, but always trying to get to the root cause of the incident. In step 3, you will now need to identify the suitable risk control measures. This is a methodical analysis stage which will enable failings and possible solutions to be identified. Risk control measures that were not in place or were in place but failed should be identified. Suitable risk control measures, which if they had been in place would have prevented the accident, can be proposed. These solutions need to be systematically evaluated to ensure that the best options are considered for implementation. If several risk control measures are necessary, they should be prioritized in the action plan. It is useful to consider at this stage whether a similar accident could occur elsewhere in the organization and might be prevented by the implementation of the recommendations. When implementing any risk control measures, remember to be both reasonable and practical. This means having regard to the severity and scope of the hazard or risk concerned, the state of knowledge reasonably available concerning that hazard or risk, or any means of removing or mitigating that hazard. So this means you need to do research, ask peers within the industry, perhaps consult professionals to understand what knowledge is reasonably available on this specific hazard or risk, the availability and suitability of means to remove or mitigate the hazard. If you are not adequately removing or mitigating the hazard, find out if someone who is in a similar line, perhaps another plumber, has reasonably practicably removed or mitigated that hazard, and see if you can follow that same methodology. The last thing is to consider the cost of mitigating or removing that hazard, as well as the benefits that are derived therefrom. Step 4 of the accident and investigation should be the action plan and implementation of that plan. At this stage in the investigation, senior management, with the authority to make decisions and act on the recommendations of the investigation team, must be involved. The action plan for the implementation of additional risk control measures is the necessary outcome of the accident investigation. The action plan should have SMART objectives. This means they must be specific, measurable, agreed, and realistic, along with a timescale. Remember, as we've mentioned earlier, any system can benefit from a good review. The continual improvement PDCA methodology is the best way of doing this. It is sad, though, that it only happens when an incident or accident occurs. So when a review of documentation is needed due to an incident, treat it as an opportunity for continual improvement. The best method for this is the Plan, Do, Check, Act methodology. The PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, and Act continual improvement methodology will help you in your company. From right in the beginning of policy and planning, to risk profiling, organizing and implementing your plans, to measuring its performance, investigating accidents, incidents and near misses, to reviewing performance and learning lessons, Plan, Do, Check, Act can help you. Please see a copy of the Incident and Accident Management Plan on page 31 of your Learner Guide.